So what I want to focus on today, obviously, I want to thank Ms. Augusta Giesler-Tam for talking a little bit about the change that we've been through as a district. I think from my own personal life and what I went through last year, there was a lot of change in my life as a chief academic officer or assistant superintendent for instruction. We all recognize the amount of change that happened at the educational center. And I know that you guys were part of that change as well. And I think that the bottom line, the message that I wanted you to take away from that video and some of our early morning comments are that we made it, we made progress, and we're back here today ready to continue our work. And I think there's a lot to be said about when you come together, the great things that you can do. And I just want to, again, stress the importance of us working together in this mission of achieving Destination 2020. So thank you for that. When we talk about the state of our schools, today I'm going to focus on our strategic plan, Destination 2020. I want to walk you through what it looks like, where we want to be, where we stand currently, and how we're going to get there. So those are your three takeaways from this conversation. Where we want to be, where we are currently, and how we're going to get there. Within that, I'm hopeful that you'll be thinking about how you can take this information back to your school and community and start to share the information around the discussion of your state of your school. And as many of you know, Destination 2020 was unveiled last year, but it's really a plan that we've been collaborating with the board on for a couple of years. So it started around 2011, and prior to that, in many cases, with some of the initiatives we were doing related to RTI and other items. So Destination 2020 consists of 6 goals. And simply put, these goals are focused on improving student success. We want 90% of our students proficient in the area of reading, writing, and math. We want 90% of our students achieving graduation. We want every student attending school at least 90% of the time. We want our parents, at least 90% of our parents, recommending their child's school to others. We want 100% of our students and staff feeling safe. And we also have a goal of working on our operational efficiencies based on key performance indicators among some of our peer districts or like districts. So it's really, again, it's 6 goals, and simply put, they're designed to improve students' success. Our first goal of 90% proficiency, when you look at it in this particular chart, this shows our reading, writing, and math scores. And again, we're focused on having 90% proficiency. You can see the longitudinal data here, the historical information, where we have some relatively high scores in the area of reading, and then you focus on our writing scores and our math scores. This past year, our preliminary data shows that we have a slightly upward movement in our math scores, slightly downward movement in our reading scores, and our writing scores are fairly flat. So while we're not there at 90%, we know that there are some good things that are happening in our district, and we know that there are some good things that are happening in your schools, and I want you to focus on that when you start to look at your school's data as well. One of the success stories, if you will, that we've seen in looking at the data further is at Fairview Elementary. They've been working hard to implement some systemic practices. And what I've found in talking with different people at Fairview and some of the support staff is that they have research-based practices that they're implementing. They're aligning kind of their practices and their instructional materials, and they have consistent monitoring of what's being implemented. And this has occurred over time. This is not something they just did one year. The last couple of years, they have teachers working with research-based instructional strategies, focusing on database decision-making through the support that we've been offering from our RTI implementation. They have the universal screening that they're focused on, ensuring that when students who are not performing where they need to be performing, they're doing further analysis using progress monitoring to monitor the supports that those students are getting. They have grade level collaboration meetings that are happening, and they're using data to determine what's best for students. They have school-wide positive behavior supports that they're implementing, classroom routines, maximizing instruction time. They've implemented explicit Tier 1 instruction, and we'll talk more about that this year. I know we spend a lot of time at the elementary level discussing that, and we really want to continue to focus that in our secondary schools. But really designating explicit instruction in the classroom. They're doing that for all students, 120 minutes a day. Additionally, they focused on Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions during the school day and after school for those students who are at risk. And finally, they added an English language development block, including explicit instruction, again, in the area of vocabulary. So I share this with you not to ask you to go out and try and do the same thing, but I share it with you because, again, we haven't met our goal of 90%, but we have seen situations where schools are making progress, and I just want to acknowledge that Fairview has done a great job in their kindergarten, first, and second grade classrooms, and I attribute a lot of that to the work that Mr. Barker has done over the last 2 years. So that's a great success story. In addition to our goals that we have, I shared those 6 goals, we also have performance measures. And the performance measures are another source of data that we look at to, I guess, make sure that we're actually making progress or that we're achieving some efforts towards our overall goal. In this graph, this focuses on closing the achievement gap. And what we want to see are the colored lines going to 0. And essentially, there'll be no achievement gap between those students who are economically disadvantaged and those students who are not economically disadvantaged. Currently, you can see in 2013, this past year, our largest achievement gap is in the area of mathematics. You can see it's at 23%, it looks like, 23.4. And then this past year, in math and writing, we actually had an increase in our proficiency and a decrease in our achievement gap. So although the math is the highest, we saw a decrease this past year where we closed the achievement gap. And when we closed it, we also increased our scores. And that's exactly what we want to see. We want to see that growth, and we want to see the achievement gap going down. In reading, although the achievement gap is the smallest, this is the gap that actually grew. And it's an area where we didn't progress in our reading. So that's something we need to further look at. We need to investigate. Again, this is the district-wide level of performance measure. And when you get your school, this is something that you'll want to look at and see if it mirrors what we have here in the district. If it's different, then there's more information to look at. Our next performance measure focuses on 1 year's growth. And this is really a proficiency index measure that the Department of Education has put forward, and it demonstrates if a student has made the expected growth, the growth that they're expected to achieve over 1 year's time. This graph shows 68.8% of our students in grades 4 through 10 who are achieving the expected growth in reading, with a 64% in writing and math. So you can see we've got a long way to go here. Roughly, in reading, roughly 70% of our students are making the expected growth that they're supposed to, and we're leaving 30% of our students to not make that expected growth. So who are these students is a question I would ask. Where do we find success in data like this? You know, you see this information, you say, how can you feel good about that? Well, we have a success story that I want to share with you. When you look at success, and one area that we can draw success is what we implemented last year in our Tier 2 and Tier 3 reading intervention in our secondary schools. As you know, much of this intervention was focused around our language exclamation point implementation. Well, in that implementation, we had a school at Hanshu, a special education classroom, and our newcomer center over at Wendler, which houses and supports students who are essentially learning English and new to the country in many cases. But in both these settings, we found some commonalities in the practices. We found that teachers were implementing the program with strong fidelity, and this is through observations, walk-through observations that occurred from principals as well as from administrative staff. Teachers were engaged in regular professional learning meetings, and the common results that we found is that students were achieving 3 times the rate of expected growth. So not only did they make 1 year's growth, or the expected growth that's going to happen over 172 days, they met 3 times that. And so what you've done there is you've not only made progress, you've done that catch-up growth, which is phenomenal. 3 times the expected growth in 1 year. I think through all the changes we went through last year, I experienced 2 times the growth. So I can appreciate what's going on there, and I'd like to again recognize the work that's happened at our Newcomer Center and specifically Hanshu Middle School, where they've done that work. That's great work. What I found through this kind of research and this analysis and talking to different people is that we're coming back to some consistent, we're coming back to research-based practice. We're coming back to alignment. We're coming back to continuous monitoring of improvement. And it's going to look different depending on your school and your needs. But I think if we want takeaways from this, that's what we need to be looking at. We're not expecting someone to go out and do cookie cutter implementation from something. But there are commonalities that we're finding and we're learning about. So again, want to encourage you to focus on that when you go back to your school and you start looking at your school's data. Within the goal of achieving 90% in reading, writing, and math, we've also identified initiatives. And specifically, these are practices or targeted efforts that I kind of equate to being new or different than how we've done things in the past. So the alignment of these initiatives with our goals is critical. And what, again, you will find is that you'll see some of these initiatives appear for several of the goals. Implementing the Common Core state standards and aligning curriculum and professional development. That's an initiative that we have going on. That's one that certainly supports 90% proficiency. We know that. Implementing RTI. We also know that through the work that we've been doing the last couple of years with our universal screening, we know that we're going to see results around the proficiency for students. Implementing our K-8 math program. Obviously, we adopted new instructional materials. We believe that that's going to make a difference for our student. We're also going to be doing universal screening in the area this year. Partner emerging services with the municipal, native, and community entities. This one is absolutely critical. I've said it many times, education is a shared responsibility. We can do our part in the building. We'll do our part to improve the practices that are going on in the classroom in our schools. We'll do our part to improve our communication with the community. But we need that shared responsibility. We need to have them be engaged in what's going on. We need them to be asking the questions of why something is going the way that it's going, and then support it. We need their critical support. So that's an initiative that you'll see throughout all of these goals. Develop and implement a comprehensive certificated evaluation framework. How does that fit into improving proficiency? Well, what are some of the commonalities we found in those 2 success stories? Alignment, research-based practices, monitoring of what's going on. We're going to get there. Those are things that we're going to have district-wide where people start to understand the common practices that are going to support students and can speak to those and can share those with others. Identify and implement performance measures for district-wide analysis. This is all part of using data to make decisions. We're going to focus on coming up with performance measures that we think are going to draw connections to success stories district-wide. So that when people say, why are you doing that? I say, well, here's what the data shows. This is what we found in looking at the data. That when we have a program that is aligned, that focuses on research-based practices and has strong connections to kids and engages kids, this is what the results have been. So those are the initiatives for our first goal of 90% proficiency. Goal number 2 is 90% of our students will graduate high school. And this graph illustrates the last 3 years. The blue is our 4-year graduation rate, and the green color is our 5-year graduation rate. This is preliminary data, but what you see is we have a steady increase with our graduation rate, climbing to 75% this past year. Our 5-year graduation rate is also positive. And in cases where students are unable to graduate, that 5-year data tells us that they still see the importance of staying in school, receiving a diploma, and persevering. So I'm very pleased with that, and very pleased that not only has gone on in our high schools, but is happening in our middle schools and elementary schools. Again, this is not just focused on one division, because we build all of those connections throughout the schools, the students' learning experience. The next success story is a perfect example of what it means to persevere. A few months ago, our local YWCA recognized 10 students who overcame major challenges in their life, ranging from dealing with financial hardship and helping others seeking political asylum, facing medical issues, as well as just adapting to new cultures. And this young lady here was one of those students who was recognized. This is Pang Tao. Pang Tao was born in Thailand in a refugee camp. And I know from my conversation with Karen Ferguson from Catholic Social Services that I had in my mind what I knew a refugee camp to be, and then talking with her, understanding really what it was. Essentially, you have families who are living in a country who want to leave that country, so they flee to another one, a nearby one. And they do it illegally. And what happens is that country then says, well, we've got a place for you where you can be to kind of keep you safe. And so they pick a piece of land that is obviously not desirable. It's, essentially you can't grow anything there. It's not, put this little area together, the family. There is very little law enforcement. There's very little education. The educational opportunities, if there are any, require the students or the children to go somewhere else to be educated. And sometimes they come back speaking a different language, so their family can't understand what they've learned and communicate with them. So Pang Tao spent the early years of her life there, and then came over to the United States when she was 10 years old. About those impressionable years and what that does to someone. So she's over here, and as part of her culture, it's not uncommon for people of her age to be married. So as a sophomore, she gets married, and not long after, she has a daughter as a sophomore. Then she has a son, and now she is providing for her family. And in her testimony, or in her acknowledgement through the YWCA, she said everything in her life changed. She experienced all that stuff that went on in the refugee camp, and then she came over here and had these opportunities, and then she becomes a parent. And she said her focus now is to make sure she does right by her children. So she's saying that she wants to become a nurse, a doctor of some sort, and give back to others so that they can have some of the medical opportunities that didn't have in those refugee camps. What I'm proud to share with you is that Pang Tao was one of our several graduates this past year. I think that's a huge success. And she's one example of all of the successes that we have in the Anchorage School District. That when people talk about what are you doing for students, how are they achieving, what are some of the challenges they face, with 49, almost 50,000 students, we're going to have a wide range of challenges. But it's examples like this that really speak to the work that we're doing, and it solidifies in my mind that we are on the right track. The next performance measure I want to share with you is decreasing our dropout rate. Graduation rate and dropout rate are calculated two different ways, but they go hand in hand. You can see here on this chart that our dropout rate in 2012-13 year has dropped below 4%, which is a great thing to celebrate. It is preliminary data, so we'll have more finalized data in the next couple months. But a success story we found in looking at this data is over at Bartlett High School. Bartlett High School, in 3 years, their high school graduation rate has risen from 68% to 72%. 4 points. Their dropout, this is really what's amazing, their dropout rate has gone from 9 7/10 to 4.1%, less than half of what it was the year before. Phenomenal. So one of the things I'll talk about later is that data doesn't really give us answers. We don't look at that and go, now we got it figured out. What data does is it helps us to ask further questions or look further into why things are the way they are. So we have some discussion with Principal Gallego. We look at some of the practices that they've been implementing in the last couple of years. And what we've found in terms of commonalities is that they were one of our leading schools in implementing RTI at the secondary level. So they came on board right away and started the conversation about what it means to provide differentiated instruction, high quality instruction, and how you build that within a secondary school. They also have continued work around social emotional learning and experiential learning for students in some of the grant work that they have received funding for. And then they have a freshman house, which is designed to help connect students as they transition into high school. So I think those are things that if you want to try to figure out what they're doing, those are the connections I would make and ask you to look at what are you doing with your staff and students to build connection in your school. Outstanding data, and congratulations to Bartlett for doing such great work. Early on, I mentioned the support that's needed from the community and how we really have to have that shared responsibility. One of the things that we're doing in the district is we're focusing on getting information out there. I'd like to share a public service announcement video that acknowledges just how important it is that we establish and continue to develop those connections with our students at every grade.
My name is Michelle Tabler, and I'm the Alaska Regional Manager for the Better Business Bureau.
Hello, my name is Joshua Wilson. I'm a business agent with the Alaska Correctional Officers Association.
My name is Brenna. I work for the city for Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility as a junior admin officer, and I'm also a birth doula.
My name is Chanmi Ju, and I'm a graduate from Service High School.
When I went to West, it was very diverse, and we had a lot of different cultural backgrounds, and I think that really helped me move on when I went outside for school to Seattle U, to not be so shell-shocked and culture-shocked in getting there and fitting in.
My favorite class at Service High School was definitely human body systems. I got to use equipment that pretty much only college students are able to use, so it was a very eye-opening and amazing experience.
Being involved in clubs and organizations at West High School helped prepare me to be a leader for the future. It helped me when I got back to Anchorage and started working with nonprofit organizations on boards. A lot of the leadership skills that I learned and the volunteering skills I learned while I was a student.
One that I guess that really made an impact with me was Sharon Sellens at Central Middle School. When I was there, I was in the School Business Partnership class, and I feel like that really changed a lot of who I was going to be and who I was going to grow up to be.
My English teacher in 9th grade, she was pretty influential, Mrs. Fitzgerald. I really enjoyed her class, and I actually ended up being an English major at Seattle U, so I guess she had a bigger influence on me than I thought.
My favorite teacher was definitely Vani Pillay, Mrs. Pillay. She saw my potential while I was in her biology class, and she asked me to join her biomedical career academy. I learned how to become a leader. I learned how to focus on my academics. I learned who I was and that my passion really is to go into medicine. Seeing how hard she works has really encouraged me to try my best as well.
I am proud to be a graduate of the Anchorage School District, and I'm happy to still be involved with the school district in different ways.
No, I would thank all the teachers I had at Inlet View and Romig and West all the way through Anchorage School District prepared me to go out into the world and come back to Anchorage and be who I am today, and my kids are in Anchorage School District, and I'm really excited about it.
I guess I've had a lot of great mentors in my life. Many of them have been teachers, professors, people I met through the school system themselves. You can't thank someone enough for the time and dedication they put into the life of a child, my life individually. It's amazing how huge of an impact that has. And it's not just that year, that day, it reverberates through the rest of that individual's life.
Thank you, ASD, for providing the best teachers for my education. There are so many opportunities that ASD provides. Thank you, ASD, for believing in me.
At the Anchorage School District, we're proud to educate all students for success in life, whatever their dreams may be.
When I grow up, I want to be a marine biologist, an explorer, a scientist. When I grow up, I'm going to be a hockey player. My name is Silas, and I want to be an archaeologist when I grow up. The most exciting thing about archaeology is swinging from my whip.
Wouldn't it be great if in 20 years we could have those students come back here and share what their accomplishments were? I mean, that would be so powerful. And that's why we're doing this stuff. And again, I want to stress the importance of those connections that we're making. Those young kids and what they're wanting to do, flash forward 10 years, those are the adults that are coming back and saying, thanks for believing in me, that we're making to them. That's a huge obligation and responsibility we have. But I can't think of anything more rewarding. Some of the initiatives that go along with that graduation rate, and again, you're going to see this and you're going to say, Ed, you already showed those initiatives. That's the point. We want you to know that we are aligned in what we're doing, that our work is very targeted and very intentional. We believe that implementing the Common Core state standards, aligning our curriculum with professional development, we're going to improve our graduation rate. We believe through the response to instruction practices and all the work that we've done around that for the database decision-making, the planning, commitment is going to make a difference in graduation. Our K-8 math program, partnering and merging with services with the municipality, our native organizations and community entities, we believe that as well. We started a collaboration with United Way Cookin Tribal Council in the Anchorage School District called the Arise, and it's really going to focus on academics, social emotional learning, and cultural practices for students. And again, looking at the data, looking at why students are achieving where they are achieving, and pooling our resources to make a difference. And then we're going to identify those performance measures district-wide to see where we're finding successes. Is it all possible for us to improve our graduation rate? And I think this next slide is obviously critical to that. This is our attendance slide, which I think we've had a lot of discussion on over the course of the year. What you see in this, from kindergarten through 12th grade, the gold color is 2012, the blue color is 2013. So as you can see, that green bar over there is 90%. That's where we want, that's our goal. We're not there yet. But I can tell you, based on this past year, we've had 11 of our 13 grades show marked improvement in attendance. 11 of 13. And when we talk about attendance and how challenging that is, many times I've had conversations with teachers saying, well, what can I do? How can I make a difference? Well, there are a lot of things we can do. We can make our classroom engaging, inviting. We can make our curriculum challenging and supportive for students. And then we can work with the parents on what that value is for their child to be there and experience every day what goes on in our classrooms. So I think this is hugely critical to us. And it's one that we have to continue to kind of promote, and not just by saying you need to be here, but by demonstrating why people would want to be there. You all showed up here today because you want to be here, right? I believe you did. And I want you to be here. So an interesting slide on top of that is kind of supports what I believe, which is if students are in school, they're going to achieve. Let us do our job. You get them to school, we'll make sure they achieve. That's our obligation, that's our commitment, that's our responsibility. You can see here on this slide, the blue is the proficiency in grades 3 through 10, and we've broken it out by subgroup, that old AYP kind of subgroup category. And then the gold line, the little line graph, is the percentage of students in attendance 90% or greater of the time. And as we started talking about attendance and how important it was, I remember telling people, I think, I'm always cautious about what I say. I think there's probably a good chance that if students are in school, they're going to do better. And so we pulled some data and we presented it, and lo and behold, it's like we just took a little marker and drew a line across the top of it. What that shows there is that exactly what I said. If students are in school, their results, their achievement results are going to be better. And so you look at where we have our lowest performing students, and you look at where we have our lowest attendance rates, and there's a connection there. So we have to start asking questions, why? Why are they low in attending? Why is there a connection with the performance? And then we have to start that cycle of inquiry and begin to figure out and analyze further and plan for what we need to do about it. One of the things that I'm really pleased to kind of share with you is the work that we've done and some changes that we've made in our attendance this past year. The first thing is that our school board has adopted an attendance policy, which is, I think, a lot more succinct. It's clear, and it defines what, first of all, what an absence is, excused versus unexcused. We have 5 categories that fall into an excused absence from school. You can have an illness, you can have a death or a serious illness in the immediate family, you can participate in a school function, you can have attendance for a religious service, and you can have extenuating circumstances approved by the principal. That's it. Those are excused absences. So I think that tells people that if you don't have one of those 5 things as your reason for not being in school, then you really don't have an excuse. And I think we haven't been able to communicate that to families. We know there are going to be situations that come up where you're not going to be able to get at school, but those are the areas that we're going to tell people, this is when you're not at school, one of these 5 areas, one of these 5 reasons. Outside of that, we want you here. We want you in school. We'll do our part once you're here, but we want you here. We've also focused this past year on coming up with attendance notifications. We're going to do automated calls to all students with an unexcused absence, including elementary schools. The piece that I think is critical in that is that that's not going to solve what some of the challenges are. That's not going to take the place of the personal communication that has to happen. I can already see some of the phone calls we're going to be getting because parents are going to say, my child was at school today. So we have to be diligent, we have to be sensitive to getting that information into the system correctly. And that's a lot more responsibility that we're going to have. It's going to increase some of the conversations that principals are going to have around making sure that that data is accurate, that is an important function of a school day. And so I want you to think about that as you process that with staff. When we ask for some of these things and we get some of these things, we have to increase and we have to change some of our practices as well. The third area that we're focused on is outreach and partnerships. I mentioned the work that we're doing with Cook and the Tribal Council and United Way, as well as the 90% with United Way that focus on attendance there. We're really committed to getting that community involvement and having everyone understand their role and responsibility in education. We have just finalized a couple of great opportunities for students that you're going to hear a little bit more about today from Sherry Spink, our School Business Partnership Director. But we've got 2 exciting contests. At the secondary level, we've got a fly for perfect attendance. One lucky junior or senior with perfect attendance is going to have an opportunity to win a new Jeep Patriot from courtesy of Lithia Chrysler Jeep Dodge from South Anchorage. I don't know if you guys heard me. They get to win a Jeep. And I have to thank Jeannie Mackey, a former school board president. She had this idea, and she said, I've got a business partner who wants to do something, and we're just trying to figure out what we can do, and maybe it's around attendance. So, thinking about where would there be a great opportunity to partner up with someone, School Business Partnership stepped forward. So we started doing some work around it, and the positive things that come from that is you've got an Anchorage raised business owner saying, I want to do this. I want to do this for the community. I want to do this for the Anchorage School District. And I think there's great benefit in it. Not only does it support what he's trying to do with his employees is increasing the awareness around being present at work and the value of staying healthy and everything else. He wants to send that message to our students as a businessman, as a community member of Anchorage, that attendance does matter. So I think that's a huge kind of lure and opportunity for kids, and I'm really excited about them stepping forward. So then when that happened, we had IBEW Dora Wilson come forward and say, you mentioned attendance the other day, and I'm just wondering if there's something we can do. And so I started thinking about, well, we've got something going on at high school where when you look at our preliminary or our early data around attendance, our high school just kind of dropped off the attendance. And then I also focused on the kindergarten because we wrestle, in elementary, we wrestle with that kindergarten age because, you know, the student may or may not be ready for kindergarten. It's kind of a stretch. You want them to have a good experience. Well, usually kids want to be at school. And so what's going to be the draw to get a kid to school? Mickey? I mean, what 5-year-old doesn't love Disney? So the potential there is that a student who with unexcused absences, a student with no unexcused absences will have the opportunity to win a trip, I think all expenses paid for 4 people down to Disney. And again, these business partners came forward and said, this is what we want to do. So not only is it for kindergarten, I think they're also looking at something for a 5th and 6th grader and potential laptops or things involved. Sherry's going to give you the details on that, but again, great partnership, great outreach going on, and hopefully you'll use this as one part of what your message is around the importance of attendance. So very excited about that. Again, the initiatives that we have, implementing RTI, merging with our community entities, enhancing our communication with parents. And this last one, you look at it and you go, student nutrition, how does that relate? Well, with 46% of our population qualifying for free and reduced lunch, in many cases, families being busy and doing other things, when we offer breakfast, when we have lunch at school, some kids, that's where they get their meals, and they like that. They need that. So I think if we can improve how we're providing services around student nutrition to our students, I think we can increase our attendance there as well. Our next goal number 4, is 90% of our parents will recommend their child's school to others. And this performance measure incorporates both the parents and the student recommendation. The one on the left shows that we have an 89% of our parents are recommending their school to others. That's very high. We're almost there. So great work is being done with our parents. When you look at our students, we have a little less approval rating. 72% of our students in grades 5th through 12 recommend their school, and 76% of our students in grades 3 through 4. So we definitely have some work to do around that. And one of the things we can do, as again Tam mentioned this morning, is we can promote the positives. We can talk about the great things that are happening. And I firmly believe that if students feel good about what's going on in the school, parents are going to feel good about what's going on in the school. Very rarely do you get a parent kind of, trying to find something that doesn't come from a student. Usually it's student generated, what their concerns are and how they feel about it. And too often, again, that message, when it's a concern, gets repeated over and over again. So I go back to the rule of 3, and what I've told many different agencies and community members when I've talked to them is that we want to hear when you have concerns. Okay? So the rule is, every concern you have, 1, you have to give me 3 things you like. Because what happens too often is when we hear, I don't want this, I want this to change, we instinctively go and say, okay, well, we've got to get resources, we're going to take that from here. That's one thing that happens. And then the other thing is that we just focus on what you don't like when there are a lot of things in the day that you do like, and we need to hear that as well. So work on that. Ask people to tell us, I want to hear your concerns, and I want to hear what you think, because there may be actually a way that we can do all of those things differently. Again, Koyanas, for those of you who don't know, we post these on our website. Success stories that you see here. Koyana to Patrick Garrity, who went above and beyond for addressing a bullying issue. Is that a parent's issue or is that a student's issue? That's a student's issue. It rose to the level of the parent. The parent became involved. Obviously something was done there and it was addressed. Took an opportunity to take the time to work through it. Parent goes out of their way and posts this information on our website. We post it on the website. They submit it. The second one is for a classroom teacher going above and beyond, creating a strong academic environment. They're not doing that for themselves. The parent's not saying, this is what you did for me, this is what you did for my child. How are they knowing about that? Either they're present in the building or their child's talking to them. So do not underestimate the value of what you bring with your interactions to the students and to the parents. It's huge. It has a huge, huge impact on everything. So those are two great success stories that I think we need to acknowledge Art LaRue for that, and Mr. Garrity, as well as everyone else who's ever received a Koyana. And take some time to look through those every once in a while. They're on our webpage. And again, the initiatives on parent recommendation, I'm not going to read through them again because you'll see it's consistent. Those are all our initiatives that we have, and we can draw the connections ourselves to our success and why they will help build the success around goal number 4. Goal number 5, it's about safety. This is an interesting one because we're at such a different time in society, and we can't have this as a negotiable kind of goal. We can't have 90% safety. We have to have 100%. I really feel that, in this graph you can see we've had kind of a flat or a very consistent feeling from staff. It's dropped a little bit over the years, and our students has increased. And I attribute a lot of that to our society has changed. As adults, we're a lot more aware of some of the things that are going on, and so we personally feel like there's a less safe society around us. But the positive that I take from this is that the students are not feeling that. They're feeling safer. And I think that's because the procedures, the practices, how we've learned to communicate with students about what you need to do and how you need to do it. And part of it is the society they've grown up in, too. We just view it a little differently. So success stories. How do you find success in this? This past year we had 2 events occur in our schools where students had a serious concern and they felt safe enough to come forward and say something to an adult. Obviously, again, we can't control what goes on, but we can control how we respond to it. These students were comfortable enough, they were knowledgeable enough in terms of what should be happening in a school to step forward and say, I'm concerned about this. I need to let an adult know. And what happened from there is that the school knew exactly what to do. They had procedures in place. The 2 schools, Diamond High School and East High School, they had procedures in place. And I actually happened to be out at Diamond that day that little event occurred, and walked into the office, and everything was status quo. They had, Principal Guyette was meeting with staff, debriefing with them on what was going on. I went in and office staff was very calm. There was no panic. Kids were in their classrooms where they needed to be. And so I think that, what we take away from that is that, again, that we are very aware of what we need to do. We're communicating with our students about that, and we're creating environments for students to feel safe. It's not just our physical safety, but it's that emotional safety as well. And so kudos to East High and Diamond for doing great work around situations that could have been very, very devastating to our community. Next, we have our initiatives again. The new one here, the construct funded school safety improvements. This past year, the legislature gave us money for school improvements, safety, security improvements, and we'll be bringing that recommendation to the board in August. Information about that soon, but that's one of the ways that we believe our initiatives are going to support safety. And then the partner emerging services, the work that we do with our SROs is hugely critical to this. Our communication with those agencies, whether it's the trauma care project that elementary principals had support with a couple of years ago, or just working with local agencies on making sure kids have their well-being provided for. And then our RTI, we're doing behavioral support work in our Title I schools this year, looking at behavior programs and how we can improve practices in our elementary schools. 6th goal, the final one, operational efficiency initiatives. Rather than give you goals, this is where we're measuring ourselves or we're comparing ourselves to like districts. And it's a range of things that we're going to be looking at. We're definitely focused on targeting our resources, and we're all aware what our financial forecast is for the next few years. Last year we realized a significant amount of savings by managing our vacancies and attrition, and once again we'll be addressing that through a high level of scrutiny in our hiring decisions this year. And I expect it's going to be an ongoing process, and you'll be working closely with your executive directors as we continue to move forward in that. We also have been working on improving our responsibility in terms of professional development and aligning our resources. This past year, we switched from pulling people out of the classroom and providing professional development on a one-on-one basis to going online. And I think we've seen some success with that. We saw that there is a new approach to doing things that we can maximize our resources. We don't need to have 15 trainers at different locations. We can have one person providing information just in time to schools in a very efficient and still very professional manner. And I want to share with you a little clip on that.
We have 63 schools that are on board with us today, which is pretty awesome, and I think we'll probably have a few more people joining us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys being here. This is a little bit of an experiment. I don't think we've ever gone this wide and this broad with a webinar before, and I certainly have never talked to this many people at one time, and especially without being able to see them. So I appreciate you being patient and supportive and understanding. I know it won't go perfectly, but it will be a new step towards a new way of us delivering professional development. So now what I want you to do is I want you to turn the page, and I want you to specifically look at K.OA.1 and K.OA.2 and K.OA.5, just those three specific standards. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a turn and talk. This is the way this is going to work. For this one time, I'm going to give the schools that I'm going to be calling on a heads up. But know that anytime I have you guys stop and talk and have a discussion, I'm going to call on specific schools to give me some feedback in the chat window. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to have this conversation, then we'll come back, and let's see who I'm calling on this time. I've already chosen who I'm calling on. I'm going to ask for Ravenwood, Bowman, Fairview, and Tyson to type into the chat response what some of the things that you guys talked about. What I'm going to do is I'm going to end the session. That will send each school to a Google Doc, which I would like for you to fill out some feedback from your school as a whole, and then later on I will be sending you a link so that you can individually give us some feedback. And then I'm gonna close this for about 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna reopen the room. So if anybody wants to come in and ask questions, I'll kind of do like an office hour.
Bobby Joe. Our Executive Director, Curriculum, Math Expert. So you can see we are changing a lot of our practices, and as part of that process, we want to make sure you, as our executive leaders, have the information necessary to move people forward, to move us forward in Destination 2020. So how do you do that? What's the next step for that? Take a look at your circle of inquiry. You've seen this model before, I believe. It's something we focus on in response to instruction. As you take your information back to your school and you talk about the state of your schools, we want you to really begin talking with your staff, working with your staff, and identifying what you have for your data. You see the cycle there and how it works. Identify what you have. Is there a problem with the data that you see? Begin analyzing it further, talking about it, getting in teams, figuring out what different people are seeing in terms of concerns, planning for it, identifying who's going to be responsible for implementing it, making those changes, kind of throwing out there what you think is working, seeing what's working at other schools, bringing that back. Then you implement it, and you review it, and you continue the cycle. Because of course when we look at data, we don't find answers, we just find more questions. And our job as leaders is to make sure that those questions get asked appropriately so that we represent all students students are engaged in what we're doing. All students are considered in this whole process. Later today, you're going to get a shorter kind of template version of this morning's PowerPoint, so you can customize it for your school. We did that last year, and I think we got some good feedback that was very helpful for people. So you'll be getting this PowerPoint, elements of it, later today. So with that, I want to thank you for all the work that you've done so far. I think I've said it before, our district is made up of great people, amazing people who do great things every day. And we've got a lot of work to do, but we're headed in the right direction. And I know that where we need to go now, we will get there in this district. And I'm excited about the school year. I hope you're excited. And I think we're going to do great things. So thank you guys for everything. Have a great rest of the day.